Long ago the Empire of Zoreth thought they had won against the humans. They had crushed Earth, burned colonies, and scattered survivors across the stars. They believed humanity was gone forever, only a broken memory in the dust of war. But fear has a strange way of living longer than truth. Even after centuries, the whisper of a name still traveled through alien halls. The Terran warship. Some called it a myth, others swore their ancestors had seen it. A black steel monster, older than empires and sharper than any blade. It was said to move through space like a shadow, always watching, always waiting. Children of the Empire grew up hearing the story of the Terran warship. Parents told them to behave, or the humans would return from the void. Priests told them humanity was cursed and wiped out forever. But soldiers knew better. Soldiers always know fear. When they sat in silence between battles, when the stars looked too dark, they felt the weight of the legend pressing on their hearts. The fear never died, it only slept. Now at the edge of the Zoreth Empire, strange signals had begun to stir. The first report came from a scout ship patrolling the black border of their space. The crew sent a message of static filled with panic, then silence forever. The High Council laughed. At first one lost patrol meant nothing in the scale of their great empire, yet deep inside the old fear began to wake like a ghost pressing cold hands against the back of their necks. A second fleet vanished, then a third. No survivors, no distress calls, only broken wrecks drifting silently on the edge of nowhere. Something unseen was hunting them. The council grew restless. Their leaders met in tall shining towers above the homeworld. Their voices shook with anger, but behind their eyes there was something worse, terror. Some claimed it was a new enemy, a rising power they had not yet discovered. Others whispered the word they were not supposed to speak, human, but no one dared say it loudly. No one wanted to believe the myth could step out of story and into reality. Admiral Krev, the oldest warrior in the council, finally broke the silence. He told them of his ancestor, who had fought in the human wars long ago. He described the Terran warship in detail, its black hull scarred, yet unbroken, its weapons burning brighter than suns. He said his ancestor saw that ship tear through fleets alone like a predator in the dark. His words chilled the council, for he was not a man of fantasy, he was a man of war. If he spoke of such things, then perhaps the fear was true. And so fleets were sent to the border, great shining armadas of Zoreth, steel. Thousands of ships moved like a wall of light, prepared to crush whatever haunted them. But in the darkness they found only wreckage, broken hulls, silent shadows. And silence was more terrifying than battle. Silence meant something greater than them was watching. Silence meant death was waiting in patience. The soldiers whispered again in their ships, the humans, they have returned. On distant worlds the whispers spread faster than fire. Entire cities spoke in secret about the Terran warship. Priests denied it, merchants laughed, but families locked their doors and prayed. They remembered the stories they were told as children, stories of betrayal, stories of vengeance, because deep in history there was a truth. The Zoreth never admitted to the galaxy they had not defeated humanity with honor. They had betrayed them. The humans had stood as allies, once brave and loyal. The Empire had struck them from behind, destroying Earth in a single cruel strike. That was the truth. And if the humans had survived, if they remembered, then vengeance was already written in the stars. Meanwhile, on the edge of space, a small outpost watched the blackness. A young officer named Varen stared at his screen with shaking hands. He saw something massive moving in the distance, larger than any fleet, larger than any station. His mouth went dry and his words froze, but finally, he whispered a single sentence that would echo across the Empire. It has come. His signal was cut off an instant later, and the outpost was gone, erased without sound or fire, just gone. Back in the throne room of the Zoreth Emperor, the council listened to the last fragment of that message. The silence after the words was heavier than any scream. The Emperor clenched his claws and tried to speak of courage, but his voice shook. He had built an empire of 1,000 worlds, ruled with iron and fire, yet in that moment, even he could feel it. The old fear had returned, the fear that never died, and it wore the shape of a Terran warship. In the outer rim a shadow moved across the stars, slow, deliberate, silent. Its black hull swallowed the light around it, as if the universe itself bent away from its presence. No signal, no flag, only silence, but everyone who looked upon it felt the same thing, a promise, a warning, a terror that had waited for centuries. The Terran warship had arrived. The border of the Zoreth Empire was no longer silent. For centuries their patrols had moved without fear, their fleets crossing the void with ease, but now the void itself felt heavier. Darker ships went missing without a trace. Outposts fell silent. Entire sectors whispered of shapes in the black sky, and no one returned to tell the full tale. The fear of the Terran warship spread from captain to soldier, from soldier to citizen, until whole planets felt the pressure of something unseen pressing down on them. Admiral Krev stood at the bridge of his flagship staring at the shifting signals on the display. He had led fleets into war for decades, he had faced every rival race in the galaxy, but nothing had ever shaken him like this. The scans showed something vast moving just outside detection range. Sometimes it appeared, then vanished. Sometimes the sensors showed impossible readings as if the space itself was bending. Krev clenched his jaw. The enemy was not hiding, it was watching, and that thought chilled him more than battle ever could. The Council had ordered him to crush the Shadow, but how could he crush what he could not see? Krev ordered his fleet forward, thousands of ships spreading across the sector, their engines burned bright, their weapons ready. Soldiers inside tried to stay calm, whispering their training codes, repeating old prayers, but in their hearts they all felt the same weight. Something was out there, something far older and far more dangerous than them. The first contact came suddenly. A destroyer on the edge of the formation screamed across comms, its captain shouting of a massive shape. Before static consumed the message, the ship was gone in a blink. No explosion, no debris, only silence, as if it had been erased from existence. Panic hit the fleet like fire through dry wood. Captains shouted orders, crews begged for guidance. Krev ordered them to hold formation, but the Shadow moved again, sliding through the edges of the fleet like a predator circling its prey. One by one ships vanished, not destroyed, not burning, just gone. Every time a sensor sweep caught the edge of something massive, the readings collapsed into static. The Shadow was too fast, too silent, too strong. It was not fighting, it was testing. Like a hunter studying the herd, soldiers began whispering again. Humans, they said the word like a curse, like a prayer. Some swore. They saw a glimpse of a black hull sliding past the stars, a single ship that blotted out the light. On the homeworld, the High Council received the reports. Each new message filled the chambers with dread. Dozens of ships lost in minutes, entire fleets paralyzed by fear. Some counselors argued it was a new empire rising from the void. Others said it was a ghost warship, a machine left behind by humans long ago. The Emperor himself sat in silence, his claws gripping the throne. He remembered the betrayal they had committed against Earth. He remembered the fire raining down on a blue world centuries ago. He had been told humans were gone, erased from history, but the Shadow on the border said otherwise. Panic spread beyond the fleet. Civilian ships refused to travel, trade routes collapsed, worlds cut off their skies, hiding behind planetary shields, as if that could save them. Priests declared the Shadow a punishment from the stars. Merchants fled in fear, soldiers deserted in the night. The empire which had ruled with iron now trembled in its own halls. Admiral Krev tried to rally his forces. He ordered trap formations, entire grids of mines, and ambush fleets ready to strike, but the Shadow never came where they wanted it. It slipped past defenses, destroyed outposts in silence, then vanished again like mist. Soldiers were drained not by battle, but by waiting, by fearing, by knowing their enemy could strike at any moment. The silence of space became a weapon sharper than blades. One night cycle on the border, a scout ship caught a clear glimpse for a heartbeat. Their cameras recorded it, a warship black as night, larger than any station, scarred, yet unbroken. It moved with terrible grace, no sound, no signal, no insignia, yet the soldiers who saw it swore they felt its gaze inside their minds. The moment the image reached the fleet, the scout ship was gone, erased like the others, but the image spread across the empire faster than fire. The myth was real, the Terran warship had returned. Krev stared at the image in silence. His soldiers waited for orders, but he said nothing. For the first time in his long life, he felt powerless. This was no ordinary enemy, no rival empire. This was history itself rising from the grave. This was vengeance given shape. His officers begged for a plan, but he knew plans meant nothing when facing a legend. The Council demanded answers, they demanded victory, but none came. Reports showed systems falling silent, whole colonies gone without warning. The warship was not just a shadow anymore, it was moving closer. Each day the Emperor tried to hide the truth from his people, but fear moved faster than lies. Whole sectors broke into riots, families fled to the outer rim hoping the shadow would pass them by, but deep down they knew there was no safety. In the throne room, a single message arrived from the border, not static, not silence, but a voice, cold, ancient, human. The message was only 2 words: we remember. The council fell into chaos. Priests wept, admirals shouted. The Emperor sat frozen. His people had betrayed humanity long ago, and now humanity had returned for justice. Back on the border, Admiral Krev stood again on the bridge, staring into the black. His fleet was broken, his soldiers trembling around them. The stars burned silent, but he could feel it. The shadow was near, watching, waiting, testing, and he knew the truth: the next time it moved, it would not test, it would strike. And so the Empire waited on the edge of its own fear, worlds holding their breath, fleets trembling in silence. A legend had stepped out of shadow into truth. The Terran warship had returned, and the Zorith Empire was no longer hunting prey, it was being hunted. The Zorith Empire had sent fleets upon fleets to the border, but none returned whole. Every day fewer signals came back, every hour more silence filled the skies. The shadow that haunted their worlds was no longer a rumor, no longer a whisper, it was real, and it was moving closer. Soldiers no longer joked in their barracks, priests no longer spoke of victory, even the Emperor himself walked the halls of his palace in silence for the first time. In centuries the Empire was afraid, and then came the first glimpse. Admiral Krev stood at the command bridge of his flagship staring at the endless stars. His fleet had been cut in half in only a week. No great battles had been fought, no glorious duel. Ships simply vanished into darkness. They would scream once on comms, then silence forever. Krev had been in wars where enemies bled and died. He had never been in a war where the enemy was not even seen, but tonight that would change. The scanners screamed and the bridge fell silent. A massive shape moved across the edge of the system. The lights of stars bent around it, as if space itself refused to touch it. At first the officers thought it was a moon drifting from its orbit, but then it moved with purpose, smooth and silent. The Terran warship had shown itself. The crew stared in silence, their hands shaking over their controls. No one dared fire, no one dared speak. The ship was like nothing they had ever seen, a black hull scarred by centuries of battle, each scar glowing faint with strange light. It was larger than their largest station, but it moved with the grace of a predator. 1,000 eyes seemed to shine along its sides, as if it was watching every ship at once. The officers felt cold, though no air left the ship. They felt watched, they felt judged. Krev forced his voice to speak. "Lock weapons," he ordered, but his own words trembled. The fleet armed itself, thousands of cannons targeting the shadow. The warship did not fire, it did not run, it only drifted closer, slow and deliberate, as if daring them to make the first move. Krev's second officer whispered, "Admiral, it is not attacking. What does it want?" Krev had no answer. He only knew that every second they hesitated, the fear grew heavier. The council on the homeworld received the live feed. The Emperor watched from his throne, the great warship filling the screens behind him. Counselors screamed for attack, priests begged for retreat, merchants wailed about lost trade routes. No one agreed on anything except for one truth: this was the ship of human legend, the Terran warship, and it had returned. Suddenly the ship sent a signal. A deep pulse shook through the fleets, not sound, not words, only a vibration felt inside their bones. Then came the voice. It was not alien, it was not machine, it was human, cold, calm, and ancient. The voice said, "We see you, we remember you." The message played once, then ended. Silence followed, but to the soldiers it was worse than any threat. It was not anger, it was certainty, it was the sound of vengeance coming. The fleet panicked. Some captains tried to retreat, others tried to fire. Krev roared at them to hold position, but chaos already spread. One destroyer fired a full volley at the warship, blazing light across the void. The shots struck the black hull and vanished like sparks against stone. Not even a scratch appeared. The warship did not return fire, it only turned slightly, as if it had noticed the attacker, and then the destroyer was gone. No explosion, no wreckage, just gone, erased in silence. The rest of the fleet froze. None dared fire again. Krev stared at the ship, and for the first time in his long career he felt helpless. He had seen worlds burn and enemies fall, but never had he seen power like this. The warship did not need to fight to win. Its presence alone was enough to shatter fleets. Its silence was sharper than any blade. Krev whispered to himself, "What are you?" He already knew the answer: humans. On the homeworld, riots broke across cities. Citizens screamed the name of the humans. Some begged for forgiveness, others armed themselves in desperation. Rumors spread faster than truth. Some claimed more warships were waiting beyond the border. Some said the humans had rebuilt an empire of their own in the shadows. All knew one thing: the Zoreth were no longer masters of the galaxy. The warship lingered for hours, circling the fleet, never striking again. Its silence was torture. Soldiers sat frozen at their stations, hands shaking, eyes wide. No one wanted to move. First, no one wanted to be noticed. Then, without warning, the warship turned and drifted back into the darkness, its black hull swallowed by stars as if it had never been there. The scanners lost it, the signals ended, the shadow was gone. Relief washed across the fleet, but it was not true relief. It was the feeling of prey spared by a predator. Only for a moment. They knew it would return. They knew it had only been the first glimpse. Krev lowered his head and whispered to his crew, "Prepare yourselves, this was only the beginning." On the homeworld, the council argued through the night. Some demanded peace talks, some demanded weapons be built stronger than ever, but the truth burned in every mind. They had betrayed Earth long ago. They had killed its people, they had burned its skies, and now the humans had returned, not to speak, not to bargain, but to remind them of the past. As the night ended across the Empire, one thought spread from soldier to citizen, from council to emperor: the Terran warship was real. It was here, it had seen them, it remembered, and the fear that had lived in whispers for centuries was now standing before them, a shadow with the voice of humanity, a ghost made of steel, a promise of vengeance. The first glimpse had come, and the Empire knew the second would bring fire. The High Council of the Zoreth Empire had gathered inside the great throne room. 1,000 torches burned across the marble walls, golden banners hung from the ceiling, and the Emperor himself sat on a black throne carved from the stone of a conquered world. The chamber was built to show power and control, but tonight it was filled with fear. The first glimpse of the Terran warship had broken their pride, and now their voices echoed in panic. The Emperor struck the floor with his staff, demanding silence, but no one listened. One counselor shouted that the humans had returned for revenge. Another claimed the ship was only an ancient machine drifting without purpose. A third demanded the Empire launch every fleet at once to crush the shadow, but their voices trembled, their eyes were wide, and their words betrayed their terror. The throne room that once commanded the galaxy now sounded like the halls of frightened children. The fear of humanity had returned, and it was stronger than ever. The Emperor finally rose from his throne. His robes of crimson shimmered in the light, his crown glowed with precious stones, but none of it mattered. His claws trembled as he lifted his hand. He spoke in a deep voice, trying to calm the storm. He told them the Empire was vast and powerful. He told them no single ship, no matter how terrifying, could defeat them. But as he spoke, the memory of the warship's black hull haunted every listener. They had all seen the feed, they had all heard the voice. We remember. His words felt weak against that silence. Admiral Krev stood at the center of the chamber, armor scarred from the border. He had been called to report before the council. His voice carried the weight of truth. He told them what he had seen. He described the warship's size, its impossible movement, its power that erased ships without fire. He told them their weapons were useless, their fleets paralyzed, and their soldiers broken in spirit. Some counselors screamed at him, calling him a coward, but he stood firm. He said he had fought every enemy in the galaxy and none compared to this. He said it was not a rumor, not a machine, not a ghost, it was human. The chamber fell silent at that word, human. The sound of it cut like a blade through the air. For centuries the Empire had buried the memory of their betrayal of Earth. They told their children the humans were weak. They told their citizens Earth was gone. They told their soldiers the story was finished. But deep inside, every Zoreth leader knew the truth. They had struck humanity from behind, destroying their homeworld. When they were allies, they had stolen victory with treachery, not with strength. And now the Terran warship had come as proof that humanity had survived. A priest in the council rose, shaking with fear. He shouted that this was divine punishment, that the stars themselves had sent the humans back to judge the Empire. Another priest argued that the warship was cursed and would bring ruin to all who looked upon it. The merchants in the chamber begged the Emperor to open talks to offer tribute to the humans, but the admirals growled in anger, saying humanity could not be bargained with. Krev alone said nothing. He had looked upon the warship and knew in his heart that no gold, no tribute, no prayer would matter. Humanity had come not to talk but to remember. The Emperor finally roared for silence. His voice echoed against the stone. He told the council that the Empire would not bow to ghosts. He said they would build weapons greater than before, they would create fleets larger than ever, and they would face this warship with the full might of their rule. But as he spoke, his eyes betrayed him. He did not believe his own words. The warship had been silent, yet it had already broken his empire with fear. What would happen when it finally struck? Outside the throne room the fear spread across the homeworld. Riots filled the streets. Citizens shouted of the humans returning. Mothers wept holding their children. Soldiers deserted their posts, whispering that no weapon could save them. Entire districts burned as panic became wildfire. Priests tried to calm the crowds, but even their voices shook. The Empire was cracking, not from invasion but from fear. Back in the throne room, a messenger burst through the golden doors. His armor was scorched, his eyes wide with terror. He fell to his knees before the Emperor, and shouted that another fleet had been lost near the outer rim, not destroyed, not defeated, erased. The warship had appeared, drifted among them, and in minutes, the fleet was gone. The survivors, if any, had not sent word. The message ended with the same soundless silence. The humans had left before the chamber fell into chaos. Once more counselors screamed, the priests collapsed, the merchants begged for ships to guard their worlds, but Admiral Krev only lowered his head. He whispered words that none wanted to hear. This is only the beginning. The Emperor sat back on his throne, the weight of his empire pressing on his shoulders. He thought of Earth burning centuries ago. He thought of the promises broken, the allies betrayed. He wondered if this warship was alone, or if more waited in the dark. He wondered if humanity had never been destroyed at all, if they had been hiding, building, waiting, and now they had returned to finish what had been stolen from them. The throne room that once commanded fear now drowned in it. The empire that once ruled 1,000 worlds now trembled at the shadow of one ship, and across the stars the Terran warship moved in silence, watching, waiting, preparing. The empire thought it had destroyed humanity, but the truth now stood clear. Humanity had survived. Humanity remembered. Humanity had returned. The Zoreth Empire had always believed silence was the worst weapon of the Terran warship. For weeks the black ship had drifted among their fleets, never firing more than a single shot, never destroying more than it wished. The silence was heavy, the silence was cruel, but then one day the silence ended. The warship spoke. Admiral Krev was on the border once again, staring at the stars. His fleet was battered, his soldiers broken. They had seen the warship erase ships without fire. They had watched it vanish into the void, and return as if space itself obeyed it. Krev did not sleep anymore. He only waited. Every second his heart whispered the same truth: humanity has returned, humanity remembers, humanity is watching. And then the scanners lit up again. The shadow had come. The Terran warship drifted into view, its black hull glowing faint from the light of distant suns. It did not fire its weapons, it did not move with speed, instead it stopped directly in front of Krev's flagship. The crew froze in silence, as if holding their breath. The warship opened a channel, no encryption, no code. It was wide and open. Every Zorath in the fleet, every station, and every world linked to the signal would hear it. The voice was human, cold, calm, and heavy with age. It said, "We remember you. You burned our home, you broke your word, you betrayed us." The words echoed through every ship and every city of the Empire, as if the galaxy itself carried them. On the homeworld, the council chamber fell silent. The Emperor sat frozen on his throne. The priests covered their faces in terror, the merchants wept, and the soldiers clenched their fists, but no one dared to answer. The voice of the humans was heavier than any command, heavier than any threat. It was not shouting, it was not angry, it was calm, and that calm was worse than rage. The warship spoke again. "You thought us dead, you thought us ash in the void, but we endured, we built in silence, we waited, and now you will answer." The Empire's citizens heard these words across their worlds. The streets fell silent. Riots ended not with peace, but with fear. Families locked their doors, soldiers dropped their weapons. All listened to the voice of humanity, a voice that had not spoken in centuries but still carried power strong enough to shatter empires. Admiral Krev stood on the bridge listening. His officers whispered in fear. Some begged to cut the signal, others said they should respond. Krev shook his head. He knew there was nothing to say. This was not a negotiation, this was judgment. The humans had spoken, and their words carried the weight of vengeance. The silence that followed was sharp, like a blade pressing against their throats. The Emperor tried to gather courage. He rose in the throne room and commanded the council to respond. He ordered messages to be sent to the warship. He told them they would offer peace, they would offer tribute, they would offer half their empire if needed. But no answer came back. The warship did not respond, it did not acknowledge them. It simply drifted above Krev's fleet, watching, waiting. The message had been given, and it was enough. The council panicked. Some argued they should surrender now before the humans struck. Others demanded they build a weapon strong enough to break the warship. The priests claimed this was a test from the stars, and those who survived would be forgiven. But Krev knew the truth. None of it mattered. The humans had already decided. The warship did not speak to bargain, it spoke to remind them of what they had done, and now it would act. The fear spread deeper than before. Entire planets fell into chaos. People refused to work, refused to fight, refused even to speak. They knew the humans were real, they knew the warship had returned, and they knew the words "we remember" were not just words, they were a promise of vengeance. On the border, the warship turned slowly, its weapons lit for the first time. Lines of fire brighter than suns glowed across its hull. The Zorath fleet screamed in panic. Some tried to fire, some tried to run, but before they could act, a single beam cut across the void. One beam, one strike, an entire cruiser vanished in white light, the debris scattered into dust. The warship spoke again. "This is only the beginning." Then the beam faded, and the warship fell silent. Once more. Krev clenched his fists. His officers begged for orders, but he gave none. What order could he give? Attack and die, run and be erased? He looked at the black ship, and knew his fleet was no longer an army, it was prey, and prey has no orders, only fear. The council received the message of the destruction. A single strike had broken their cruiser, a single voice had broken their empire. The Emperor demanded answers, but there were none. The priests prayed, the merchants begged, the soldiers trembled. The throne room that once ruled 1,000 worlds now felt smaller than the shadow of one warship. Across the empire the words echoed, "We remember." Cities painted them on walls, families whispered them to their children, soldiers dreamed of them in nightmares. The empire had become a cage of fear, waiting for the next word, the next strike, the next silence. And in the void the warship drifted, patient, unshaken, its black hull a ghost among the stars, its voice a memory of betrayal, its silence a promise of fire. The humans had spoken, they had remembered, and the Zorath Empire knew that the time of judgment had begun. The Zorath Empire had always believed in the strength of numbers. Their fleets stretched across the stars, their armies crushed rivals with fire and steel. For centuries they had ruled with iron hands, but now one warship had broken that pride, and soon the Empire would learn what true power meant. The Terran warship had spoken, and now it would strike. Admiral Krev stood at the bridge of his flagship. His fleet was scattered and broken by fear. Soldiers whispered the human words, "We remember," as if they were a curse. His officers looked to him for guidance, but his voice was hollow. He had seen the warship test them, erase ships with silence, and vanish into the void. He knew what was coming, and no command could save them. Suddenly the scanners screamed, the warship had returned. The black hull drifted into view, silent and patient. It moved with the calm of a predator closing in on its prey. The Zorath fleet panicked. Captains shouted orders, soldiers cried out, engines flared as ships tried to scatter, but the warship did not hesitate. Its weapons ignited with fire brighter than suns. The first beam lanced across the void, cutting a battleship in half in a single strike. The explosion lit the darkness like a new star, and then faded into ash. Silence followed, but only for a moment. The warship fired again and again, each strike perfect, each strike final. Entire cruisers vanished, entire squadrons were erased in seconds. The Zoreth fleet answered with everything they had. Thousands of cannons thundered across the void, missiles streaked like falling stars, mines detonated in burning light, but the Terran warship did not fall. The black hull swallowed fire, as if it were rain. Weapons that had shattered moons only scratched its surface. Shields that bent against suns wrapped it like a cloak. The warship moved through the storm without slowing, without fear. The Zoreth realized their firepower was nothing compared to the fire of humanity. On the homeworld, the council watched the battlefield in silence. The emperor sat on his throne, eyes wide with disbelief. He had ordered the attack. He had promised the council that numbers would win. He had told his people that one ship could not face an empire, but the feed told a different truth. The warship cut through fleets as if they were dust. Each shot turned centuries of power into wreckage. Each strike turned pride into terror. The throne room that once ruled 1,000 worlds now trembled under the weight of a single ship. Krev shouted for retreat, but it was too late. The warship moved faster than any ship its size should move. It pierced formations, split lines, scattered squadrons. Every time the Zoreth tried to regroup, the warship struck with precision. Their weapons could not track it, their shields could not hold it, their courage could not face it. Soldiers screamed across comms, begging for orders, begging for mercy, begging for life, but none came. The warship gave no quarter. A massive dreadnought, the pride of the Empire, moved forward. Its cannons fired in unison, its shields glowed bright. Its captain shouted that they would hold the line. They fired volley after volley, the void shaking with light, but the warship answered with silence. Then a single beam cut through the dreadnought, splitting it open like paper. The light of its explosion burned across the system. 1,000 lives gone in an instant, 1,000 voices silenced forever. Soldiers in other ships wept when they saw it, the pride of their empire destroyed by one strike. On planets across the Empire, citizens watched the feed. They saw their fleets burn, they saw their champions fall. They heard the human voice again, we remember, and now you will remember too. Panic spread faster than fire. Worlds locked down, cities rioted, priests shouted of judgment and punishment. Families fled into shelters, but deep down they all knew nothing could save them. The humans had returned, and their vengeance was unstoppable. The battle raged for hours, but to the Zoreth, it felt like centuries. Ship after ship fell, fleet after fleet shattered. Krev fought with every tactic he knew, ambushes, traps, diversions, but nothing worked. The warship was always faster, always stronger, always one step ahead. Finally Krev stood in silence, staring at the black hull on the screen. He whispered words that his crew would never forget. We are not fighting a ship, we are fighting the past, and the past cannot be destroyed. The warship paused. After the last fleet fell, the wreckage of thousands of ships burned in silence across the void. The stars glowed with the ashes of the Empire. The warship sent one last message before it vanished into darkness. You thought fire and steel belonged to you, but it belongs to us. The message cut across the Empire, echoing in every city, every station, every world. The silence that followed was heavier than death. The council collapsed into chaos. The emperor screamed for more weapons, more fleets, more hope, but his people no longer believed. His soldiers no longer obeyed. His citizens no longer trusted. The Terran warship had shown them the truth. The empire was not invincible. The empire was prey. Humanity had returned with fire and steel, and the age of Zoreth power was ending. And in the void the warship drifted once more, silent and patient, its black hull scarred, but unbroken, its weapons quiet, but waiting. The galaxy watched in fear, knowing this was only the beginning. The humans had spoken with fire. They had reminded the stars who truly owned them, and soon the empire would fall completely. The Zoreth Empire had never known silence for centuries. Their skies had thundered with fleets, their cities had roared with victory, their soldiers had marched to the sound of drums. But after the Terran warship unleashed its fire, the empire began to fall into a silence more terrifying than any war. It was not the silence of peace, but the silence of death. Worlds that once glowed bright across the stars now went dark, one after another. Admiral Krev returned from the border with only fragments of his fleet. The faces of his soldiers were pale, their voices broken. They had seen ships burn in seconds. They had seen dreadnoughts fall with one strike. They carried the sound of the human words, we remember, in their hearts like a curse. Krev stood before the emperor and the council. He said nothing at first because there was nothing left to say. His silence was the loudest report of all. The emperor demanded he fight again, demanded he rebuild the fleet, demanded he restore pride, but Krev only whispered, the humans will not stop. In the outer rim, a colony world named Vera went silent. It was a stronghold with walls of steel and defenses carved into the mountains. Its people believed they were safe until the shadow appeared above their sky. The Terran warship did not send an army, it did not send demands. It drifted once over the planet's orbit, and every weapon, shield, and defense failed in an instant. No explosions, no screams, no warning, just silence. The warship moved on, and the colony was gone, its name erased from the Empire's maps. Within days, other colonies followed one by one. Lights on the star charts went dark. The priests on the homeworld claimed this was divine punishment. They shouted from their towers that the Zoreth had betrayed the humans, and now the stars had sent judgment. Their words spread like fire, and the people listened. For the first time in history, citizens no longer trusted the emperor. They no longer feared his armies. They feared the warship. They feared the humans. Entire cities painted the words "We remember" on walls and doors. Families whispered them to children at night. Soldiers carved them into their armor, not as pride, but as surrender. The emperor tried to silence the panic. He ordered executions of priests and rebels. He sent his guards into the streets. He promised new fleets, new weapons, new victories, but his voice no longer reached his people. They had seen the warship destroy everything they trusted. His promises were dust against the silence of humanity. Krev traveled to the rim again, hoping to protect a line of worlds. He stationed fleets around them. He built walls of fire and steel. He told his soldiers to hold no matter the cost. But when the warship appeared, everything collapsed. It did not need fleets. It did not need armies. It struck once, and entire planets went dark. Krev watched as 3 worlds fell in a single night. His soldiers begged for retreat, but he knew retreat meant nothing. He whispered to his officers, "The warship chooses who lives and who dies. We have no choice." News spread faster than ships. Entire sectors surrendered without a fight. Some planets sent desperate signals to the humans begging for mercy. Others destroyed their own fleets rather than face the shadow. The empire was breaking, not world by world, but soul by soul. The Zoreth were no longer rulers. They were prey, hiding in the ruins of their own empire. The council chamber grew darker with each report. Merchants wailed about lost trade. Priests begged for forgiveness. Admirals shouted for impossible victories. The emperor sat silent on his throne. His claws gripped the armrests, his eyes empty. He had built his power on the belief that no one could challenge the Zoreth, but now one ship had erased centuries of pride. He could not admit it, but deep down he knew humanity had returned to end them. On a distant frontier, a young officer named Thren watched the warship pass above his station. He did not fire, he did not move, he only stared at the black hull drifting like a shadow against the stars. It did not strike his station, it simply passed by, leaving silence in its wake. Thren collapsed to his knees, whispering the words, "We remember," as if they were his own. He knew in his heart, the warship had spared him not out of mercy but out of patience. It was choosing its path, carefully erasing worlds with a design no Zoreth could understand. The silence spread deeper. Entire sectors no longer sent messages. Entire fleets no longer reported. In the Empire's maps turned black with each passing day. Planets that once glowed with lights of cities now appeared as empty stones drifting in darkness. The Zoreth called them ghost worlds, abandoned by life, erased by humanity. Krev returned once more to the homeworld, his armor torn, his voice heavy. He told the Emperor that the Empire was falling faster than they could count. He told him the warship was not just fighting battles, it was erasing their history. It was not content to defeat them, it wanted them forgotten. The Emperor shouted in rage, but Krev did not move. He only whispered, "You betrayed them, you destroyed their home, now they will destroy ours." The throne room fell into chaos again. Counselors screamed, priests wept, soldiers stood in silence, but no one had a plan, no one had hope. The Empire was dying, and they all knew it. The Terran warship had turned their fleets into wreckage, their colonies into dust, their people into whispers. Worlds were falling silent, and the silence was spreading. In the void, the warship drifted once more. Its black hull swallowed the stars. Its weapons slept for now. Its voice did not speak, but its silence spoke louder than fire. The galaxy understood. Humanity had returned. Humanity remembered, and soon the silence would reach the heart of the Empire. The Zoreth Empire had ruled for thousands of years. Their fleets had crushed rivals. Their armies had burned planets. Their emperor was seen as a god. But after the Terran warship returned, everything began to break. The silence of dead worlds spread like a disease, and the Empire started to crack from within. Fear was more powerful than any weapon. It poisoned every city, every soldier, every leader. In the capital city, protests filled the streets. Citizens shouted against the emperor. They demanded answers. They demanded protection. They wanted to know why the Terran warship was destroying them, and why their rulers had no defense. The emperor ordered soldiers to crush the protests, but many soldiers refused. Some even joined the crowd. They too had seen the human shadow in the stars. They too believed the warship could not be stopped. The council gathered in panic. Some wanted to flee and hide on distant colonies, others wanted to beg for peace. A few demanded more weapons and more ships, but everyone knew it was useless. One ship had already erased entire fleets. No new weapon could change that. In their hearts they knew the Empire was doomed. The only question left was how long it would survive. On the rim colonies things were worse. Entire governors abandoned their posts. Some planets declared independence, thinking they could escape the warship by leaving the Empire. Others opened channels to humans, pleading for mercy, promising resources, loyalty, even slavery, if only the warship would pass them by. But the humans did not answer. Their silence was the same as their fire. No one could bargain with them, no one could escape. Admiral Krev, who had fought the warship again and again, now walked like a ghost. He knew no strategy, no weapon, no plan could save them. His fleets were scattered, his soldiers broken. He warned the Emperor again, humanity is not just fighting us, they are unmaking us. The Emperor shouted back, we are eternal, we cannot fall. But even he no longer believed his own words, the cracks were too deep. In one sector civil war exploded, local rulers turned against the throne. Some believed if they killed the emperor the humans might spare them, others thought they could create their own kingdoms in the ruins of the empire. Fleets that once fought for the emperor now fought each other, planets burned not by humans but by their own kind. The empire was eating itself from inside while the warship continued its slow march. The priests declared the emperor cursed. They told the people the gods had abandoned them because of their betrayal of Earth centuries ago. The Zoreth had crushed humanity and erased them from the stars. Now the priests said vengeance had come. The people listened. They no longer bowed to the emperor. They prayed to the humans, whispering, we remember, as if those words were holy. On one frontier world, soldiers refused to fight. When the Terran warship appeared in the sky, they dropped their weapons, they painted their armor black, and waited. They did not fire, they did not run, they simply accepted silence. The warship did not destroy them, it passed without a shot, leaving the soldiers trembling. Was this mercy, or was this a warning? No one knew, but news of this act spread across the empire, and more soldiers began to surrender without a fight. The emperor grew more desperate. He executed counselors who spoke of surrender. He ordered Krev to gather every fleet and prepare for one final strike. But Krev knew the truth. The fleets no longer obeyed. The admirals whispered of rebellion. Some already sent secret signals to humans hoping to save themselves. The emperor's orders carried no weight anymore. His empire was no longer united. It was cracking apart like shattered glass. In hidden chambers, merchants met in secret. They traded maps to human wreckage. They offered intelligence about fleets. They betrayed their own people, hoping the humans would reward them. None were rewarded. The warship answered with fire and silence. The humans did not want allies, they wanted the empire gone. Still, betrayal spread faster than loyalty, and the empire's heart grew weaker with each passing day. Even the royal guard lost faith. Some whispered of killing the emperor themselves. They said he had brought doom upon them centuries ago when he ordered humanity's destruction. Now his pride had cursed them all. The throne room that once echoed with power now echoed with fear. Every whisper was treason, every shadow was rebellion. The empire was cracking, and soon it would collapse completely. Krev walked alone through the halls of the capital. He remembered when the empire was strong, when its fleets filled the stars. Now those same fleets were ash. He thought of the words the warship had sent, we remember. It was not just a message, it was a judgment. Krev realized humanity was not here to conquer, humanity was here to erase, to balance the scales of history. He wondered if even surrender would matter, or if all of them were already marked for silence. On distant colonies more cracks appeared. Some planets refused to send tribute, some declared they were now under Terran protection. Even without proof, the Emperor's banners were torn down, replaced by crude drawings of the black warship. Children sang songs of the humans, as if they were legends returned from the grave. The Empire's culture, its unity, its soul was vanishing faster than its armies. When the warship destroyed the planet Ulthar with a single strike, the shock was too great. Ulthar had been a jewel of the Empire, a shining world of culture and wealth. Its fall broke the last illusions of strength. The council split open. Some fled into exile, some begged for surrender, some plotted against the Emperor himself. The Empire was not simply falling, it was shattering. Above it, all the Terran warship drifted in silence, watching the cracks spread. It did not need to rush, it did not need to strike. Every day the Empire was destroying itself. Humanity's vengeance was patient. Every hour that passed, another piece of the Zoreth Empire broke away. The warship had become more than a weapon, it was a shadow over every mind, a reminder that the past could never be erased. In the end, even the Emperor could not deny it. He stood in his throne room alone, listening to the echo of empty halls. His voice shook as he whispered, the Empire is eternal. But in his heart he knew eternity had ended. The cracks had grown too wide. The Empire was already breaking into pieces, and soon the Terran warship would bring the final strike. And so the galaxy watched in silence as the once mighty Zoreth Empire crumbled from within. Planets fell into chaos, fleets turned against each other, soldiers surrendered, civilians prayed to their enemy. The cracks grew larger every day, and somewhere in the darkness the warship drifted, waiting, patient, silent, ready for the end. The Zoreth Empire was breaking piece by piece. Planets rebelled, fleets deserted, citizens turned against their rulers, yet the Emperor refused to accept the end. He declared one last stand. He demanded that every loyal fleet, every soldier, every weapon be gathered for the final battle against the Terran warship. He promised glory or death. He promised that the Empire would rise again if only they could destroy the human shadow in the stars. Admiral Krev was summoned to the throne room. The Emperor's eyes burned with madness, his voice shook with desperation. You will lead them, Krev, you will show the galaxy that the Zoreth do not kneel. Krev bowed, but his heart was heavy. He knew the truth. He knew no fleet, no weapon, no army could defeat the warship. Still he obeyed, because he could not disobey. He would lead the last stand, not for victory, but because there was nothing else left. Across the Empire ships were forced into formation thousands of vessels of every size from mighty dreadnoughts to broken frigates limped toward the mustering point. Some crews deserted before they arrived, some mutinied and killed their captains, but enough obeyed to create the largest fleet the Empire had ever gathered. It stretched across the void, a sea of warships glowing like fireflies preparing to die. Civilians watched in silence. Some prayed for victory, some prayed for mercy, most simply prayed for the end. They knew their fate depended on what would happen in that last battle. The Terran warship had destroyed fleets before, but never so many at once. Perhaps the Empire still had a chance, perhaps this would be their salvation, or perhaps it would be their grave. The priests blessed the fleet with ancient rituals. They burned incense and sang of the gods who had once given the Zorith dominion over the stars, but their voices trembled. Even as they prayed, they too remembered the whispers we remember. They too felt the weight of doom pressing down upon them. In the center of the vast armada, the Emperor's flagship stood massive and bright. It carried banners of gold and black, its hull lined with weapons, every turret glowing with energy. The Emperor himself commanded from within, promising his people that this would be the day of redemption. His voice was broadcast across the Empire: stand together, fight as one, show them the power of eternity. The words rang loud, but carried no true faith. Everyone listening knew eternity had already ended. At last the moment came. Sensors screamed. The Terran warship appeared on the edge of the system, silent, dark, vast, and alone. It did not call for parley, it did not send a message. Its presence was enough. The fleet that filled the stars trembled before a single ship. A hush spread across the armada, then the Emperor's order came: fire. The void erupted. Thousands of beams, missiles, torpedoes, and plasma bursts streaked across space. The sky itself seemed to burn with fury. All of it surged toward the lone Terran warship, a storm of destruction that could have torn apart worlds. Krev watched from his command seat, his hands clenched, his voice whispered useless words: please let it be enough. The storm hit the warship, and the warship remained. A shimmering field of energy rippled across its hull, absorbing the blows. Dreadnoughts poured their fire, carriers launched waves of bombers. Even the Emperor's flagship unleashed its full fury, but nothing broke the Terran silence, nothing pierced its shield, nothing touched its dark steel. Then the warship answered, one beam, a single pulse of light brighter than a sun. It tore through the nearest dreadnought, splitting it apart in an instant. The explosion lit the void like a dying star. Panic spread through the fleet. Some captains screamed to retreat, others screamed to fight harder. Krev shouted orders, but his words drowned in chaos. The fleet that had gathered to stand as one began to crumble apart. The warship moved slowly, calmly. Each strike was precise, each beam a death sentence. Whole squadrons vanished with every pulse, whole carriers shattered into fragments. The fleet's storm of fire continued, but it was like dust against a mountain. The Terran warship glided forward, unstoppable, untouchable, unbroken. The Emperor's voice echoed again across the fleet: fight, cowards, fight for eternity. But his words no longer inspired, they sounded hollow, they sounded desperate. The captains no longer listened. Some fled into the darkness, others shut down their weapons, hoping to surrender. Krev watched the lines collapse, and he felt the weight of history crashing down. The last stand was not a stand at all, it was a massacre. Still some ships fought bravely. They charged directly at the warship, ramming their hulls against its shields. They detonated their reactors in suicidal explosions, but the warship endured. The sacrifices meant nothing against its silence, against its memory. One by one the heroes of the Empire vanished into ash. The Emperor refused to retreat. He screamed at his crew to keep firing. Even as his own flagship began to burn, he swore that eternity could not die, but flames consumed his throne room, and silence answered his rage. His ship broke apart in a burst of fire, the golden banners of the Empire crumbling into dust. Krev stood on the bridge of his failing ship. His crew begged to flee, begged to surrender, begged to live. But Krev only watched the Terran warship drifting closer. His voice was calm: we deserve this. His ship exploded a moment later, vanishing like all the rest, the last admiral of the Empire consumed by the fire of vengeance. The battle ended as quickly as it began. The largest fleet in history was gone in a single day. The void was filled with wreckage and silence. The Terran warship drifted alone, untouched, unchallenged, victorious. The last stand of the Empire had been no stand at all. It had been the final proof that nothing could stop humanity's return. Across the galaxy the news spread faster than light. The Emperor was dead, the fleets were gone, the Empire was shattered. Worlds that had once trembled before Zorith banners now tore them down in celebration, or fear. Some swore loyalty to humanity, others swore only silence, but everyone knew the truth: the Empire had ended. And still the warship moved on, its black hull glowing with the fire of vengeance, its silence louder than any voice, its shadow covering the stars. The last stand was finished, but the reckoning was not over. The warship still remembered, and its memory had not yet been satisfied. The Empire was gone, the great fleets lay in ruins, the golden banners that once waved across 1,000 worlds were nothing but ashen memory. The Emperor was dead, his throne consumed by fire. The last admirals were gone, the last soldiers vanished in silence. What remained of the mighty Zorith dominion was only fear and scattered fragments of broken power. The Terran warship had not just won a battle, it had ended an age. Across the stars the news spread faster than light. Planets that had long bowed under the weight of Zorith rule rose in rebellion. Colonies that had suffered chains for centuries shattered their prisons. Governors once loyal to the Emperor fled into the dark hoping to save their lives. The galaxy shifted overnight. The Empire's name that once struck terror now carried only shame and doom. But the Terran warship did not stop. Its dark hull drifted through the void with calm and silence. No words came from it, no demands, no promises. It simply moved world to world, system to system like a shadow of judgment. Each time it appeared rulers trembled, each time it passed whispers spread. It remembers, and no one dared to test its memory. Some worlds opened their gates willingly. Their leaders knelt before the shadow begging for mercy, begging for life. The warship answered with silence, but it spared them. The planets were left shaken but alive. Others chose defiance. They armed their defenses, they raised their fleets, they screamed that the Empire would rise again. The warship answered with fire. Their skies burned, their fleets vanished, and their worlds were left as husks spinning in silence. The galaxy soon learned surrender was survival, defiance was death. On a forgotten moon a council of former governors met in secret. They argued for hours. Some demanded peace with humanity, some demanded revenge, others demanded only escape, but none could escape the truth. The Empire was broken forever. Nothing could rebuild what had been lost. The Terran warship was not just a ship, it was a symbol, it was a wound in the heart of the galaxy that would never close. The survivors remembered the old stories told in whispers long before the fall. They spoke of the first war with humanity, a war so fierce that even the Zorith feared to mention it. They had believed those stories were only myths. They had believed the Terrans were gone forever, but the warship proved the myths true. The humans had not forgotten. They had returned not with words but with silence and fire. The warship itself was their answer. Among the ruins refugees wandered. Millions of citizens once proud of their empire now drifted between stars, homeless and afraid. Some begged for sanctuary in free worlds, some tried to rebuild new colonies in the edges of space, but wherever they went the shadow of the warship followed. No one trusted them, no one offered welcome. The name of Zorith had become a curse. Priests of the old gods cried out in despair. They said the Empire had been punished for its arrogance. They said the gods had abandoned them, but others whispered a darker truth. The humans were the gods now, the humans were the punishment. Their silence was more divine than any prayer, their fire more eternal than any hymn, and in the hearts of the survivors fear grew into worship. A new religion was born in shadows, worship of the Terran memory. Meanwhile the galaxy outside the Empire watched in shock. Some races rejoiced that their ancient rival had fallen, others trembled that humanity had returned. No one dared to challenge the warship, no one dared to speak against it. They remembered the fate of the Empire, and they chose silence, they chose fear, and so the warship moved freely unchallenged across the stars. In the ruins of the capital world smoke still rose from broken towers. Rivers of fire cut through the cities once called eternal. Monuments of gold and black lay shattered in the dust. A single shadow crossed above the warship, drifted slowly over the ruins, its silence heavier than thunder. It did not fire, it did not speak, it only hovered, as if marking the end of an age, as if declaring this is finished, the Empire ends here. Among the wreckage a child looked up at the shadow. His parents had been lost, his city destroyed, yet his eyes did not hold hatred, they held awe. He whispered one word, humanity. That whisper spread, it became legend. Survivors told their children that the humans had returned, that they had destroyed the Empire not with cruelty but with justice, that they remembered every wound, every betrayal, and had answered at last. And in those stories humanity became more than a people, they became an inevitability. As years passed the Empire's name faded from memory, its maps vanished, its borders dissolved. Worlds that had once been chained under Zorith rule built new lives, free, but cautious. They whispered always of the shadow in the void, the Terran warship. They warned their children never forget, they told their leaders never provoke, they taught their priests never deny. The humans had returned, and they were watching. The warship itself became legend. Some swore it vanished into deep space after the last battle, some swore it still moved silently between the stars, others swore it waited in the dark, watching, waiting, remembering, but all agreed on one truth: the Empire was gone, and the warship had ended it forever. Admirals in other empires studied the battles, they examined the wreckage, they asked how one ship could destroy thousands, they built new weapons, new fleets, new defenses, yet none dared to test them, none dared to call humanity's silence a bluff, because deep inside they all knew the warship had not fought with technology alone, it had fought with memory, with vengeance, with inevitability, and no weapon could stand against that. Generations later songs were still sung of the day the Empire ended. Some called it the Great Silence, some called it the Reckoning, some called it the Return, but all agreed it had changed the galaxy forever. No throne was safe, no empire eternal, no fleet too strong to be broken. Humanity had proved that with one warship, with one shadow, with one memory. The Terran warship never spoke, never declared victory, never demanded surrender, yet its silence was louder than any emperor's speech, its shadow was stronger than any fleet, its memory was sharper than any weapon, and so the galaxy lived with that silence, with that shadow, with that memory. They lived knowing that the humans had returned, and they would never be forgotten. And in the end the empire that once ruled the stars did not fall with glory or courage, it fell with fear, with fire, with silence. Its end was not a battle, but a judgment. Its end was not defeat but erasure, and the name of the Zorith Empire passed into dust while the name of humanity rose again, written not in words but in unbroken fire. The empire was gone forever, and the Terran warship moved on remembering.